genetically programmed to have osteoporosis or coronary artery disease. We're programmed to be absolutely perfect. What happens is that a man-made, toxic, polluted environment and lifestyle, an unhealthy lifestyle, overlays on our genetics, and in some families it can be coronary disease, and some it could be cancer, and some it could be Parkinson's. But once again, it's not in our DNA to have these certain things. And therefore it's preventable. Now, the medical community likes to say that it is genetic because then it implies there's nothing we can do about it. Well, listen, your mother had osteoporosis, you have osteoporosis, therefore you got to take the pharmaceuticals. That's not the case. There's always, reasoning why. There is such thing as family history.
If you haven't done so already, go ahead and click that subscribe button down below. It's a little red button. You punch that, and it's going to notify you every time we put out a new episode that can help you improve your bone health. And then also, if you haven't done so already, head over to BoneCoach.com, sign up for the free 7-day osteoporosis kickstart. That's going to walk you through everything you need to be doing right now to get on the path to improvement and stronger bones. After you do those two things, go ahead and press play on this episode, and I'll see you inside. Welcome to this episode of the Bone Coach Show. Joining us today to explore heart health, bone health, and holistic cardiology is Dr. Jack Wolfson. Dr. Jack Wolfson is a board-certified cardiologist, Amazon best-selling author, husband, father, and the nation's #1 natural heart doctor. Jack works to give people a healthy heart naturally without prescription medications or invasive procedures. He is available to treat people with heart disease, teach natural treatment options for heart disease, and speaks at events, and he is very well known for being a holistic cardiologist. So Dr. Jack Wolfson, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Kevin. It's a pleasure to be on. And, again, it's so important because, you talk about bone health, I talk about heart health. They're intimately intertwined, and so many people are suffering from both. So let's get to it.
Let's do it. And you call yourself a natural holistic cardiologist. How did that come to be? Maybe give a little backstory there.
Yeah, I like to say that I was born into the medical matrix. My father was a cardiologist, so I picture myself in my mother's womb, and I'm listening to my father's conversations, with his, colleagues, and even with my mother, and talking about, cardiovascular issues. So from a young age, I heard that early on. Ever since I was, I can remember, I wanted to be just like my father and be a cardiologist, and I would do exactly that. Then I would do 4 years of medical school, 3 years of internal medicine, 3 years of cardiology, and then finish up my training and join the biggest group in the state of Arizona as a hospital-based cardiologist. Well, along that time, my father was not doing so well. In his late 50s, he was diagnosed with depression, which would actually morph into a Parkinson's-like illness. And then eventually we took him to the Mayo Clinic, and the Mayo Clinic said he's got progressive supranuclear palsy, or PSP. Similar to Parkinson's, but there's no treatment for PSP. And I asked them what the cause was, and they said, we don't know what the cause of this is. And simultaneously and serendipitously at that time, I was introduced to this 29-year-old woman, and she's a doctor of chiropractic. And she tells me all the reasons why my father is sick and dying, the way that he eats, the way that he lives, and so many other factors that we can dive into. But here, like, the Mayo Clinic has no idea, and here's this 29-year-old chiropractor, and she's got all the ideas. So I listened to what she had to say, and I started changing my personal ways. I would change the way that I eat, the way that I lived, and I would start getting in trouble in the big medical practice. So eventually, I had to leave that practice and start my own company, Natural Heart Doctor. But along the way, she would tell me, you need to become a DC. As well. And I'm like, wait a second, you want me to become a chiropractor, a doctor of chiropractic, after all these years of my training? And she said, no, not DC doctor of chiropractic, but DC doctor of cause. You have to get to the cause of why people get sick, the cause of why people are dying. And that's exactly what I did. And here we are 12 years later as a doctor of cause. And there's not many holistic cardiologists out there, around. My goal is always to, reduce and eliminate pharmaceuticals whenever possible, and teach people the real reasons why they get sick. And I guess to wrap up that story, my father would die a tortuous and cruel death at the age of 63, which obviously is, one of the reasons, the main reason why I am what I am right now. He helped to create that. I would marry that young chiropractor, and now almost 20 years later, we've got 4 beautiful children, and It's been a blessing beyond belief.
Well, I'm sorry to hear about your father's passing, and it's great to hear though that you found the love of your life and you've got some kids, and that's great there. Now, maybe we can talk about, just because our audience is focused on bone health and osteoporosis, but obviously they care about their heart health as well. Maybe we can make the connection first between bone health and heart health, and then dive into some of these other areas after that that you see affecting people's hearts and what we can do about that.
Yeah, the medical community is really good at coming up with labels. This person has osteopenia. This person has osteoporosis. This person has coronary artery disease or Parkinson's, or my father's diagnosis of PSP. We're really good at all those different labels, but what we're not good at all is the causation of why people develop osteoporosis, osteopenia, coronary artery disease, etc. And we always got to focus on the why. I don't believe in bad genetics. I believe that whoever created us, call that entity God or evolution, or God created evolution. However we got here, we're perfect. We're not genetically programmed to have osteoporosis or coronary artery disease. We're programmed to be absolutely perfect. And what happens is that a man-made, toxic, polluted environment and lifestyle, and I'm blaming the men on this one, Kevin, because the men are responsible for the vast majority of chemicals that's ever been created. So, again, it's just, this unhealthy lifestyle overlays on our genetics. And in some families, it can be coronary disease, and some it could be cancer, and some it could be Parkinson's. But, once again, it's not in our DNA to have these certain things. And therefore, it's preventable. Now, the medical community likes to say that it is genetic, because then it implies there's nothing we can do about it. Well, listen, your mother had osteoporosis, you have osteoporosis, therefore you got to take the pharmaceuticals. That's not the case. There's always, reasoning why. There is such thing as family history, because, when you, I guess, violate our principles of eat well, live well, think well, then, certain families will have coronary disease, some will have cancer, some will have dementia and other disorders, but it's always like that foundational thing. So again, it's all these different things that, whatever leads to bone issues also leads to heart issues.
And maybe we could talk about inflammation, because we know that inflammation has a negative effect on bone health. How does that impact our heart?
Yeah, well, inflammation I like to think of as kind of like this intermediary, and it's between causation and the disease. So in between is this concept of inflammation, oxidative stress. You can throw an immune system activation in there, but these are all normal responses, really. They're just a response to the injuries that we're giving to it. So when we eat the wrong foods, live an unhealthy lifestyle, that leads to inflammation and oxidative stress, which also is linked to, as we said, bone diseases, cardiovascular disease, brain disease, cancer. Elevated inflammation is linked with all disorders. All disorders are linked with inflammation and its sister diagnosis, oxidative stress. I love talking about oxidative stress because that's just all the free radical damage that's occurring. So our body's generating all these free radicals in the process of normal functioning. So we have to have a good antioxidant balance there to balance off that. And when we have too much free radicals, not enough antioxidants, then we're in oxidative stress, and the risk of things is higher. So not only did we generate those markers of inflammation and ox stress, those markers are actually problematic and deleterious to the body as well, interfering, with good bone growth and bone, growing activity. Another area, right there again is that, like this link between coronary artery disease, and that could be, again, collagen, deficiencies, could be problems with vitamin C, proline, lysine, same things that are, problematic in people with bone disorders. So the medical doctors, again, that we love to think that each cell is like living on an island all by itself. But you and, of course, the listeners know that we are one human being. We're not a conglomerate of trillions of cells. We are one entity, and they're all intimately intertwined.
Hey, it's Bone Coach Kevin Ellis. I want to take one more minute to talk about if you are somebody who was newly diagnosed with osteopenia or osteoporosis, and you're at a point where you're stressed, you're worried, you're overwhelmed, you have no idea where to start or how to get started getting confident in your plan. I want to tell you about the Stronger Bone Solution Program. Over 5,000 people have come through this Stronger Bone Solution program, and it walks you through the exact process you need to fill in the missing pieces, uncover critical things in your plan that you may not be aware of, and help you make modifications, adjustments, and tweaks to get you to the place where you're building stronger bones. I want you to get confident in your plan so that you can focus on living life and enjoying the life that you deserve with the people you love most. So if that's where you want to be, head over to bonecoach.com/apply and apply for our Stronger Bone Solution program right now. I'm Bone Coach Kevin Ellis. I want to see you inside this program. I want to help you get on the path to improvement and stronger bones. Hope to see you inside very soon. Let's get back to the episode. Now, I've heard you mention diet and some specific nutrients there. If we're talking about heart health, what are there foods that are really good for our heart? Are there foods that are not so good for our heart? And if so, can we identify what those are?
Yeah, the food story is the subject of tremendous debate, and I'm not going to pretend that I could, change anyone's opinion right here. But I guess the first thing I would start off is that whenever we think about food, we should think about organic food, getting the chemicals out of our food. So no matter what diet you're on, vegan, vegetarian, paleo, keto, carnivore, make sure that your food is organic and clean, free-range grass-fed meats, wild seafood. You and I were at an event together recently, and the founder of the event goes through, painstaking measures to make sure that his food is super clean. That's the way he wants to eat. He also jokes that that's, the way Dr. Jack Wolfson wants to eat. And of course, it's a health-minded community that you and I are in together, and, that's what the people want to eat. So, we do have to, talk the talk and walk the walk. We do have to live it to lead it, all these little, sayings that we go by. But it really is true. And I think for all the women out there, a lot of the women are the matriarchs of the family. So it's like as you live it to lead it, your children, your grandchildren, friends, your husband, I mean, they're watching you. Everybody on this call is influencing other people. So we really, again, just lead by example is so critically important there. And, I would dive into the most important foods. I mean, to me, the most important foods are free-range grass-fed meats, specifically the organs. And there's some good organ supplements for people who don't want to swallow it. And we could talk about those. But I also think that wild seafood is the most important food that anybody could eat for any particular reason. Wild salmon, sardines, anchovies, clams, oysters, shrimp, lobster, crab, scallops. Salmon roe. Can you imagine a salmon roe, right? So that's the egg of a wild salmon coming from the Pacific Northwest. It contains all the nutrients, all the vitamins, all the minerals, all the proteins, all the fats that a salmon needs to come to life, including all the salmon bones, right? All the bones of that salmon, all the calcium, all the phosphorus, all of the cofactors that go into healthy bone formation are inside of there. It's really just it's a perfect food. And one of the videos we have on our website is of this bear. It's a grizzly bear, and it's essentially hunting for wild salmon. And what does it do? It goes upstream, and there's salmon everywhere. And the bear steps on the salmon and out squirts the salmon roe. The bear eats up all the salmon roe, and then just throws the salmon aside, looking for another salmon to squeeze out its roe. I understand we're not bears, but we are omnivores. We are hunter-gatherers. Another side story real quick. So we have goats and we have chickens. We have cats and we have dogs, where we live in Colorado. So if you give a goat, if you put the meat out for the chickens to eat and the cats to eat, the goats, they get excited thinking you're bringing something for them at first, but they're repulsed by the meat. They won't even go near it. But the chickens and the cats and dogs, they'll go after it. They're omnivores. The goats, they're not. They are herbivores. Yeah, they may catch some insects and stuff in there. I guess the point I'm trying to make is that humans, we are hunter-gatherers. We've been doing so since the dawn of human existence. And that's what I think is ultimately the best diet, is that hunter-gatherer approach. And I think people get the best results from that.
I love that we're talking about natural whole foods, organic, grass-fed, wild seafood. I love that. There is one food that I have a question about, and specifically because I know there are some misconceptions around cholesterol and heart health. And eggs are one of those foods that are high in cholesterol, but have great protein, have a lot of other great nutrients that can help support us. What are your thoughts on eggs? And then maybe let's touch on the misconceptions with cholesterol and how that affects our heart health.
Yeah, I love eggs, just like we mentioned the salmon eggs before, eggs. And of course, I'm talking about the best of the best, regenerative farm, preferably your own. We only eat our own eggs and we feed them. I mean, just the cleanest, best diet, what the chickens love. And the egg is a cocoon for a baby chicken. Again, it contains all the proteins, vitamins, minerals, proteins, fats that a chicken needs to come to life. You can't raise a chicken on oatmeal. It's just you're not gonna get very far, doing that. And the cholesterol, like you said, is a huge part of that. So cholesterol, whenever we talk about it, most people conjure up this idea of heart attack and stroke. Yet every single cell in the body contains cholesterol. Why do humans make cholesterol? Because we can't live without it. The cell membrane is the fence that surrounds every cell, loaded with cholesterol. Our sex hormones, testosterone, estrogen, progesterone, all come from cholesterol. A lot of these women, for example, looking for hormone replacement, oftentimes it could be just as simple as increasing the cholesterol in their diet, increasing the cholesterol production in their body. Vitamin D, the sunshine hormone, doesn't come from a pill bottle. It comes from the sun hitting cholesterol coursing through the skin, and it turns it into vitamin D. And that's why I love to talk about the purpose of the skin. The skin is just not an organ to apply sunscreen to, that's for sure. It's not an organ just to apply, makeup and things like that to it. Our skin is a solar panel built to collect light. Our eyeballs are built to collect light. And the more we understand that, the longer we're going to live. So the cholesterol running through the skin turns into vitamin D. Our digestion, the liver makes cholesterol, puts it into the gallbladder, secreted on top of the food for digestion. And all this stuff really relates to, again, a woman and her bone health and cardiovascular health, because when you have cholesterol in your gallbladder, if you lost your gallbladder, I'm sorry. That is certainly a problem. But again, as you have these bile salts with cholesterol in there, it helps to emulsify our food. We can therefore absorb our nutrients and build strong bones. So cholesterol is a molecule to be celebrated, not vilified. It's vilified really by the pharmaceutical companies in order to promote their agenda.
Yeah, and great clarification for people. So we're actually producing some of our own cholesterol too. It's not just what you're eating every day. There is production that takes place within us as well. So
the vast majority of our diet, or the vast majority of the cholesterol in our body, is because our liver is manufacturing it, not because we're eating it. Yeah,
love that. And let's also talk about blood pressure. How important is that to really understand our blood pressure? What are good numbers there? And how does that relate to our heart health?
There's a lot of things regarding blood pressure. First of all, the answer is not pharmaceuticals. That's very clear in the literature, although that's what the medical doctors reach for. If you're on high blood pressure drugs, you got to work with somebody to get off of those pharmaceuticals. It is not a good strategy. So ultimately, we want to, get our blood pressure under control by the concept of eat well, live well, think well, which is kind of how I view, the lens of everything. So no matter what somebody comes to me with, whether again it's bone disorders, heart disorders, neurologic disorders, it's always about our 100-year heart method of eat well, live well, think well, and that's going to help regarding blood pressure. Blood pressure drugs have tons of side effects. They're not effective. They do not have any meaningful impact on longevity or preventing heart attacks and strokes. There's actually data to the contrary. So blood pressure is certainly important. It is a problem, but the most important thing is root cause and figuring that out.
And when you're trying to figure out root cause issues relating to anything we're talking about here, relating to your heart health, your blood pressure, are there specific markers you like to look at or any specific tests you like to investigate?
Well, just like you, I love those things, the markers of inflammation and oxidative stress. So I really don't focus on cholesterol levels at all. Sometimes we'll always look at advanced particle numbers, apolipoprotein B, apolipoprotein A, There's a very important cholesterol marker called LP little a, which is genetic and should be checked. But then otherwise, the markers of inflammation, oxidative stress, HSCRP, phospholipase A2, oxidized LDL is a measure of damaged lipid particles. We do a urine test as well called lipid peroxides, which is also very important. So, there's some phenomenal lab tests, homocysteine, and then we could look at things like intracellular vitamins and minerals. For example, vitamin K2. Vitamin K2 keeps calcium in your bones and out of your arteries. So what is your intracellular K2 level? So that's why it's best to check those. And I love the kind of that phrase, test, don't guess. A lot of people are taking various supplements. And how do you know if they're working? Well, you do the laboratory test. And I know you guys are doing advanced lab testing. You and I talked about that when we met. Some of the markers you guys are looking at as it relates to bone health. But that information is so critical for people to get. But most people just go to their doctor. They're given a pharmaceutical. Maybe in the case of bone disorders, they're just like, okay, well, let's do this. We'll check a DEXA scan in a year and see how you're doing. There's so much more that we can do on a much more frequent basis. Where we can check lab tests because they change so quickly. I think it's much better approach.
Now, I want to get to your 100-year heart lifestyle in just a second. The eat well, think well, live well. I love that. But before we do that, maybe we can talk about what are the conventional treatments that people may be being recommended for their heart health, and why may those not be the right things for them?
Well, one thing a lot of people get are coronary CT scans or calcium scans. I'm against that. I don't like radiation. I don't like radiation-based tests. I think radiation causes a lot more damage than any value of the test. So I don't recommend those tests. Stress testing can be helpful for people if they have symptoms. So if they're walking up a flight of stairs and they have some chest tightness or some left arm pain or something that goes out of the ordinary, then you can do a stress test based on that. So those are kind of the main ones. Cardiac ultrasound is a good test, looking at heart function, heart valves. There's different ultrasound technology where you can look at the carotid arteries. You can look at thickness of the carotid arteries, something called CIMT, which can be another good surrogate marker that's non-radiation based. And then, like we said, I love doing all the advanced laboratory testing. I also really enjoy looking at markers that are toxins. So looking at mold mycotoxins, other environmental toxins. Recent study came out that looked at plastic. And what they found was that people with plastic in their carotid arteries, when they did a procedure, they removed the plaque in the artery and they looked under a microscope. And 2/3 of the people had evidence of plastic visibly there under a microscope, and 1/3 of the people, surprisingly, in this environment, had no plastic. Well, the group with plastic had 3 times the risk of a heart attack, stroke, and dying in the following 3 years compared to the people who didn't have plastic. So that makes plastic a bigger risk factor than smoking and diabetes and obesity and high blood pressure combined. So that's why it's important to really do a deep dive into these things. And all these environmental toxins, they interfere with the gut microbiome, they interfere with the gut health and lead to intestinal hyperpermeability, inflammation, oxidative stress. And when all this stuff is going on, right, you can't absorb the nutrients you need for good bone health. You can't absorb the nutrients you need for good cardiovascular health. Those toxins gum up the system. So if you think about how an osteoblast and an osteoclast, works to improve bone health and for good bone health, if those things are dysfunctional because of all these environmental toxins, then we're going to develop the problem. So the deficiency is not in the pharmaceuticals. The deficiency is in the eat well, live well, think well.
So let's talk about eat well, think well, live well, and the 100-year heart lifestyle that you've developed.
Yeah, so we all debate the food part of the story, and again, whenever people think about food, think about movies or TV shows like Alone, Naked and Afraid, Survivor. Those people become hunter-gatherers immediately, and those who would be vegan or something like that, they either change quickly to hunter-gatherer or they quit the show. Most commonly, they quit the show because they've got no idea how to hunt. they're the wrong people for the show, but it's just a good thing to look at. Weston A. Price, nutrition, physical degeneration, dentist, 1920s, travels around the world with his wife by boat, and they look at all these different societies, and they're all hunter-gatherers that they come across. And those who follow hunter-gatherer are phenomenally healthy. Those people who eat the white man's food, if you will, they're incredibly sick. So those are the kind of foods that we eat there. Hunter-gatherer is not going to be obviously processed food, ultra-processed food. It's also void of much of the grains. Certainly the grain intake was very low in hunter-gatherer days. One area I think that I do give a little bit of liberty to is dairy, and I'm a raw dairy guy. So I think raw dairy is appropriate for most people. I don't have a problem with raw dairy. There are some cardiovascular benefits to it. Again, tons of vitamins and minerals, the proteins and the fats in the raw dairy. So I think that's kind of allowable. And then you got raw milk, raw cheese, raw butter, yogurt, kefir. A lot of those things, of course, when they're in the raw state, they're loaded with probiotics to really improve the gut microbiome, for example. So, that's the food part of the story, but people forget about the live well. They forget about the fact that our ancestors went to sleep shortly after the sundown, just as it got dark, they went night-night. They weren't staying up until 1, 2 in the morning on tech or, doing whatever they're doing in the artificial lights. All that stuff leads to osteoporosis. And heart disease and on and on and on. So we go to sleep with, shortly after the sundown, we awake before the sunrise, watch the sunrise, watch the sunset, and then we spend the day in and out of the sun with that solar panel exposed. All plants and animals are outside in the sun. We're physically active. I know that's very important, for you, and you talk about that a lot. I mean, our ancestors were like running around all day long, and the vast majority of people these days, they sit, 8, 10 hours a day. So our ancestors were always running around, and when they weren't running around, they were chilling, maybe doing some activities, maybe taking in a nap or something like that. And then I also throw in, I believe everybody should be under chiropractic care, not because my wife makes me say that, but because I believe it's true. Holistic dentistry is very important. Dental health is critical, right? I mean, I don't have to tell you that when you've got things like periodontal disease, gingivitis, that's linked to everything, including bone disorders and cardiovascular disease. So a good holistic dentist. And then you got that massive category that we talked about, the toxins. And that's this big thing. So it's eat well, live well. And then while I get on top of brain here, let me talk about the think well component, because I love to touch on this, especially, really to anybody and everybody, because the things like fear, anxiety, worry, stress, anger, depression, all linked with higher risk of cardiovascular disease, childhood traumas, PTSD, highly correlated with cardiovascular disease. I don't know if there's much in the literature regarding bone, but I'm sure we could either find something or certainly make the case that, wait a second, you mean that childhood trauma and PTSD, that could lead to bone, disorders? And yeah. And therefore, if you work to recover from those things with a professional in that area, of which I am not, but if you do, then you're going to achieve, success. And then real quick, there's 2 medical diagnoses. One is called Takotsubo cardiomyopathy or broken heart syndrome. The stereotypical case is a 45 to 65-year-old woman. She gets in a fight with her husband, fight with her boss. Something traumatic happens, and she has a massive heart attack. And we go in there with a catheter. We take a look around. There's no coronary artery disease. There's no blockage. It's probably some kind of a sudden spasm or clot that happens because of the stress. And that kills women. If it doesn't kill them, it could lead to long-term congestive heart failure, early morbidity, mortality. So that's one diagnosis related to stress and why we need to watch out for that. The other is called SCAD, or spontaneous coronary artery dissection, where this is kind of like the blood vessels have 3 layers, and there is a tearing of in between 2 of these layers, leading to a massive heart attack, often in a woman who is undergoing stress. So it's very important to be ahead of that game on the stress.
Hey, it's Bone Coach Kevin Ellis. Thanks so much for tuning in to this episode of the Bone Coach Show. If you're finding it helpful, please leave a positive rating and review. Hit that like button, subscribe to the podcast or the channel. That lets us help more people and reach and serve more people. And it also lets us know that this is helpful to you on your journey to better health and stronger bones. And then also, right down in the show notes, you can actually find a link to my free Bone Healthy Recipes Guide. That's going to give you access to some amazing and delicious recipes to support your journey to stronger bones. And then also, we have a link to my free Stronger Bones Masterclass in the show notes too. And that is the 3-step process that has helped people in over 1,500 cities around the world get confident in their plan for stronger bones. Over 110,000 people have taken part in this, and it's been really, really helpful for them. And I want you to have free access to it too. So add your name and email right down there in the show notes, get access to that free Stronger Bones Masterclass, and let's get you confident in your Stronger Bones plan today. Yeah, and I would just reinforce that as well with bone health. Just like you mentioned, for heart health, this is really important. But for bone health, there are plenty of studies that show that if we've got childhood maltreatment or depression or any of these other things that could be influencing that stress response, that can be something that influences your bone health in a negative way also. So addressing those underlying issues, doctor of cause, right, is so important to get to that root cause issue and address those things. Anything else?
Yeah, well, Kevin, I mean, because a lot of times, real quick, is that, somebody listening may say, well, okay, if someone has a history of trauma or stress, well, maybe they're not going to sleep well. They're not going to get good sunshine. They're not going to take care of themselves, right? They're going to eat a lot of sugar. But when these researchers look at the data, they try and correct for those and account for those factors so therefore to really isolate, is it purely the trauma and the stress thereof that leads to bone health problems or cardiovascular health problems? And the way that I would answer that is that, yeah, it is those events by itself, because when you have a history of stress and your body is in chronic stress or acute stress, your body is in survival mode. So when you're in survival mode, you're not in healing mode. Your body's not thinking about, how can I take care of my liver, and how can I take care of my my brain or my other organs, or being attentive to bone health and laying down healthy bone. It's only in survival mode. It's in fight or flight mode. And that's all it's trying to do. It's diverting all energy to your muscles, to your brain, in order to kind of escape this kind of chronic stress and trauma. And that's why we really get back into that parasympathetic tone. We got to get back into the rest, digest, create, type of moment. And there's a lot of different things that we can do to gain, parasympathetic tone. You and I both have been around, people who are, breathing experts. So kind of like breath work can do that. The chiropractic adjustment gets you back into parasympathetic tone. There's different devices, that can be used, for that, kind of vagal stimulation devices. But humming, singing, gargling, all those things can really help to engage the parasympathetic nervous system, which ultimately helps the heart, helps the bones, helps everything.
It's so important to get these foundational pieces in place that you've talked about. Eat well, think well, live well. Anything else that you want to share with our audience that you either A, think is important to know, or that B, you're really excited about that's coming in the future, that's maybe a regenerative or integrative therapy or something like that you are excited about coming down the pipe?
Well, I'm definitely a foundational guy. So, again, like you talked about, the eat well, the live well, the think well, the test, don't guess, evidence-based supplements, of which there's a lot there, biohacking strategies, and that's, sauna and red light and IVs and ozone and hyperbaric and all these other things. But I do want to bring the attention to a home that is water damaged, and a home that is water damaged that has mold and or bacterial growth will either quickly or slowly kill the inhabitant of that home. So what is a mold mycotoxin? Well, the most famous one most people are familiar with, it was discovered about 100 years ago when a researcher, Alexander Fleming, walked into his lab. So Fleming looks into his petri dish and he sees that the mold is killing his bacteria. So that's the first discovery of penicillin is what that was. So that's a mold mycotoxin that leads to killing of bacteria. So it kills bugs in our gut microbiome. The mold releases all those chemical bombs, Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, to help kill things in its environment. It's a survival strategy of the mold. And what kills the bacteria also kills us. So I would implore everybody, test, don't guess. Do not think that you're not living in mold and water damage. Again, you got to test for it. Everybody is living in mold until proven otherwise.
Wow, this has been so informative. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge, your expertise, Dr. Jack Wolfson. Maybe we could let people know where they can find you on your website, any social channels you want to call out, podcasts, anything like that.
You got it. Our website is naturalheartdoctor.com. Come check it out over there. My book is for free, freeheartbook.com. The Paleocardiologist, The Natural Way to Heart Health. It's about nutrition and lifestyle and everything else. And then, we're on all social media at Natural Heart Doctor. So, Kevin, I sincerely appreciate you and everybody at BoneCoach for having me on.
Well, appreciate you. Appreciate your time. And thank you so much for doing all you do in the natural holistic cardiology space. It's so important, the work that you do. And I'm just glad that our audience has a resource for this as well. So for everybody listening, you can find all the resources, show notes, everything mentioned here today over at bonecoach.com. We'll link right down below to everything that you need. And we'll see you in the next episode. Hey, it's Bone Coach Kevin Ellis. Hope you found that episode helpful and that you enjoyed it. Just one last reminder, if you haven't done so already, head over to bonecoach.com, sign up for your free 7-day osteoporosis kickstart. It's going to tell you everything you need to do to start getting on the path to improvement. Hope you found this helpful. I'm your Bone Coach, Kevin Ellis. I'll see you soon.